They were laughing at me. All of them. My mother, my sister, my ex-husband, gathered around that Christmas table like vultures picking at my failed marriage. The jokes got crueler with every glass of wine. I sat there, silent, drowning in shame, just like I'd done my entire life. Then the cafe door opened. My son walked in, snowflakes in his hair, a folder clutched in his hands. The room went silent. He looked at me with eyes full of rage and love and said 5 words that shattered everything. Mom, they've been lying forever. I remember standing in that living room on Christmas Eve, 2012, watching my relatives laugh over eggnog and gingerbread cookies, their voices bouncing off the walls of my cousin's cafe like cruel echoes. I was 39 years old, recently divorced, and apparently still the family punchline. My Aunt Joan leaned back in her chair, wine glass tilting dangerously, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, Megan, at least you tried marriage. Some things just aren't meant to last when you rush into them." The table erupted in polite chuckles. My mother, Eleanor, sat at the head wearing her signature tight smile, the one that never reached her eyes. She dabbed her lips with a napkin and added, "Megan has always been impulsive. We warned her about Richard, didn't we, Lydia?" My sister nodded, her perfectly manicured hand resting on her husband's arm, multiple times. "But you know Megan, she never listens." I felt my throat tighten. The divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier, and the wounds were still raw. Richard had left me for his assistant, a 26-year-old with ambition and no baggage. No 12-year-old son. No history of family disappointment trailing behind her like a shadow. I wanted to defend myself, to tell them that Richard's infidelity wasn't my fault, that I hadn't rushed into anything, but the words stuck like glass shards in my throat, just like they always had. My cousin Beth, hosting the party, tried to change the subject. "The ham is almost ready. Should I bring out the appetizers?" But Uncle Rick, emboldened by his 3rd bourbon, waved her off. No, let's talk about this. Megan, honest question. What did you expect? You married a man you barely knew after what, 6 months? And now you're raising that boy alone?" He said, "That boy, like my son Oliver, was a burden, a mistake, something to be pitied." My hands trembled in my lap. I thought about leaving, grabbing my coat and walking out into the December cold, but something kept me frozen in that chair. Maybe it was the same thing that kept me silent at 7 when my mother called me a disappointment. Maybe it was the weight of 40 years of being told I wasn't enough. Then my mother spoke again, her voice sharp and clinical. "The real tragedy is that Oliver will grow up without a father figure. Children need stability, and Megan, you've never been able to provide that." Lydia nodded sympathetically. "It's genetic, I think. Some people are just built for chaos." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, the kind where everyone knows something cruel has been said, but no one wants to acknowledge it. I stared at the table, at the red cloth napkins and the flickering candles, and I felt 7 years old again, standing over broken glass, waiting for someone to tell me I mattered. That's when the cafe door opened. The little bell above it chimed, bright and clear, cutting through the tension like a knife. Cold air rushed in, carrying snowflakes and the scent of winter. Everyone turned to look, and there, standing in the doorway, was Oliver. My 12-year-old son, wearing his navy coat and his father's old scarf, his cheeks flushed from the cold. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a man I hadn't seen in 24 years, a man I thought I'd never see again. My breath caught. My mother's wine glass slipped slightly in her hand. Lydia's face went pale, her composure cracking for the first time in decades. The man stepped forward, snowflakes melting in his graying hair, and his eyes found mine across the room. "Hello, Megan," he said quietly. Oliver looked up at him, then at me, his expression unreadable. "Mom," he said, his voice steady and sure, "there's something you need to know, something everyone here needs to hear." The room froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I was seeing, because the man standing next to my son, the man my family was now staring at in horror, was Dr. Nathan Cross, the marriage counselor whose name had been on that envelope I found when I was 15, the envelope I'd hidden away and tried to forget, the envelope that had been addressed to my mother. Oliver reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick manila folder. He walked toward the table, his footsteps echoing in the silence, and placed it in front of my mother. "Grandma," he said, his voice calm but laced with something cold, something I'd never heard from him before. "I think it's time you explained what's inside this." My mother's face drained of color. Her hands shook as she reached for the folder, then pulled back as if it were on fire. "Oliver, this is not appropriate. This is a family gathering." "Exactly," Oliver said, his eyes hard. "A family gathering? So let's talk about family. Grandma, let's talk about the truth." Dr. Cross stepped closer, his presence commanding the room. He looked at my mother, then at Lydia, then finally at me. "Megan," he said softly, I'm sorry it took this long. But your son found me 6 weeks ago. And when he told me what he'd discovered, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I felt the room spinning. Found him? Discovered what? My mind raced back through the years, through all the hidden letters, the whispered conversations, the locked cabinets and buried secrets. Oliver opened the folder himself when my mother refused to touch it. He pulled out a stack of documents, photographs, old letters with dates from the early 90s. Mom, he said, looking directly at me. His eyes filled with something that looked like both love and rage. You need to know what they did to you. What they've been hiding your entire life? And as he began to speak, as the first words left his mouth, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my childhood, my family, my entire existence had been a lie. Oliver stood there in the doorway, snowflakes still clinging to his dark hair, and the entire cafe seemed to hold its breath. But it wasn't just Oliver. Behind him was a woman I'd never seen before, mid-50s perhaps, with kind eyes and a leather briefcase clutched in her hands. She looked nervous. Oliver looked determined. My mother was the first to break the silence. Evan, darling, you're early. We weren't expecting you until dessert. She used that syrupy voice she reserved for guests and grandchildren. The one that made everything sound pleasant even when it wasn't. But Oliver didn't smile. He didn't move toward her for the usual hug. Instead, he walked directly to where I sat, his footsteps deliberate, and placed his hand on my shoulder. Mom, he said, his voice steady but tight, I need you to listen to me, and I need everyone here to stop talking. The room shifted uncomfortably. Daniel leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, an amused smirk playing on his lips. Evan, this is a family event. Whatever teenage rebellion you're going through can wait. Oliver's jaw clenched. It's Oliver. I've asked you to call me Oliver for 3 years now. Daniel waved him off. Right? Oliver, still? This isn't the time, actually. Oliver said, his voice cutting through the condescension like ice. This is exactly the time. Because I'm tired of watching my mother get humiliated by people who are supposed to love her. Lydia set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. Evan, all of you are being disrespectful. Your mother raised you better than this? Did she? Oliver shot back. Or did you all just assume she didn't because you've spent her entire life convincing her she's not good enough? The woman behind him stepped forward, clearing her throat softly. My name is Dr. Rebecca Hale, she said, her voice calm but firm. I'm a family therapist, and Oliver contacted me 6 weeks ago after finding some documents that concerned him deeply. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Documents? What documents? My mother stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is absurd. I don't know what kind of stunt you think you're pulling, young man, but this ends now. Sit down, Grandma, Oliver said, and there was something in his voice that made her freeze. Something cold and adult and absolutely unyielding. She sat. Dr. Hale opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. The same one I'd seen peeking out of Lydia's purse. She placed it on the table in front of me. Megan, she said gently, I think you should see this first. Before anyone else speaks, my hands trembled as I reached for it. Inside were documents, letters, photographs, some yellowed with age, others more recent. The first page was a psychological evaluation dated 1987. My name was at the top. I was 15 years old when this was written. I scanned the page, my vision blurring. Patient demonstrates normal emotional development. No signs of instability. Recommendation: family therapy to address maternal projection and sibling favoritism. I looked up at my mother. Her face had gone ashen. What is this? I whispered. Oliver knelt beside me, his hand still on my shoulder. Keep reading, Mom. The next document was a letter from Dr. Nathan Cross, the marriage counselor, dated 1992. It was addressed to my mother. Dear Mrs. Carter, as we discussed, I cannot in good conscience support your request to have Megan declared emotionally unfit for independent decision-making. She is a capable young woman who deserves autonomy. I urge you to reconsider this path and seek family counseling instead. My breath caught. Emotionally unfit. Independent decision-making? I don't understand, I said, my voice breaking. Lydia stood up, her face flushed. This is a violation of privacy. You had no right to go through those files. I had every right, Oliver said, turning to face her. Because you kept them? In your home office? In a cabinet marked family records. I found them when I was looking for Mom's baby photos for a school project. The room exploded. Aunt Joan gasped. Uncle Rick leaned forward, squinting at the documents. Daniel's smirk had vanished, replaced by something that looked almost like panic. My mother's voice was shrill. Those documents are taken out of context. I was protecting you, Megan. You were fragile, emotional. You didn't know what you wanted. Fragile. I repeated the word, tasting like poison. You told a therapist I was unfit? She told 3 therapists. Dr. Hale interjected quietly, and when they all refused to support her claim, she stopped taking you to therapy altogether. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. All those years, all those moments when I'd been told I was too sensitive, too impulsive, too broken. They weren't observations. They were a campaign. Oliver pulled out another document. This one was newer, dated just 8 years ago. It was an email exchange between my mother and Daniel. My ex, "You need to see this, Mom," Oliver said softly. I read the first email from my mother to Daniel. She's becoming too independent, too confident. We need to remind her of her limitations before she makes another mistake. Daniel's response, "I'll handle it. The promotion at her work won't go through. I've already spoken to her supervisor." My vision swam. The promotion. The one I'd worked so hard for. The one I'd been told went to someone more qualified. Daniel had sabotaged it. My own mother had asked him to. I looked up at Daniel, at this man I'd loved, trusted, built a life with. "Why?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He just stared at the table, his jaw tight. Lydia spoke instead, her voice defensive. "Because you needed to be grounded, Megan. You've always had your head in the clouds. Mom and I were trying to help you see reality. Help me," I said, my voice rising. "You destroyed my career. You hid my award invitation. You convinced me I was broken. You are broken." My mother snapped, and the room went silent. She stood there trembling with rage, her mask finally cracking. "You've always been broken, Megan. Weak, needy, incapable of handling real responsibility. Everything I did was to protect you from yourself." Oliver's hand tightened on my shoulder. "No, Grandma," he said quietly. "Everything you did was to control her, and I'm not going to let you do it anymore." Dr. Hale pulled out one final document, a legal paper dated 2 weeks ago. "Megan," she said gently, "Oliver asked me to help him prepare this. It's a cease and desist order against Eleanor Carter and Lydia Brennan, prohibiting them from contacting you or making decisions on your behalf without your explicit consent." My mother's face went white. "You can't do this." "I already did," Oliver said, "and if you fight it, I'll make sure every single one of these documents becomes public record." The room was suffocating. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process. 49 years of my life rewritten in a single moment. And then Oliver leaned down and whispered in my ear, "Mom, there's one more thing. Something I haven't shown you yet. About Dad." My blood ran cold. About Daniel. What else could there possibly be? I stared at the email in Oliver's hands, the words blurring together as my brain tried to process what I was reading. Compatibility pairing. Lydia Carter and Daniel Whitmore. My sister, my husband, 5 years before the divorce. My mother's signature at the bottom like a death warrant. "This isn't real," I heard myself say, but my voice sounded distant, disconnected, like it was coming from someone else's body. "This can't be real." Oliver's face was set in stone. "It's real, Mom. I verified it with 3 different sources. The therapist's office confirmed the sessions happened. They have records." Daniel shot to his feet, his chair clattering backward. "This is insane. Evan, you don't understand what you're reading. Those were exploratory sessions, nothing more. Your grandmother was concerned about your mother's mental state during our marriage." "It's Oliver," my son said again, his voice deadly calm. "And you're a liar." The cafe went deathly silent. Even the kitchen staff had stopped moving. Lydia stood slowly, her composure cracking at the edges. "Oliver, you're misinterpreting professional documents. Mother was trying to help Megan. We all were. Help her." Oliver turned to face his aunt, and I saw something in his expression I'd never seen before. Pure contempt. "Is that what you call stealing someone's husband? Help." I never Lydia started, but Oliver cut her off. "Don't. I have bank records showing you and Daniel met for private dinners 17 times in the 2 years before the divorce. I have text messages. I have hotel receipts." The room erupted. Aunt Joan gasped audibly. Uncle Rick muttered something under his breath. My cousin Sarah stared at Lydia with her mouth open. Daniel's face had gone from pale to red. Those were business meetings. "I was helping Lydia with a legal case at the Riverside Inn," Oliver shot back. "The same hotel where you told Mom you were attending a conference in Chicago?" My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the folder. Inside were more documents. Credit card statements, photographs. One showed Daniel and Lydia at a restaurant, their hands clasped across the table, both of them smiling in a way that made my stomach turn. "How long?" I whispered, looking at Daniel. "How long were you planning this?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. Lydia answered instead, her voice tight. "Megan, you have to understand. Daniel and I, we connected on a level that you two never could. It wasn't planned. It just happened 5 years before you divorced Mom," Oliver said. "It just happened for 5 years." My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling with rage. "Enough, all of you. Evan, you've gone too far. These are private family matters that you've twisted into some conspiracy theory. Eleanor, Dr. Hale interjected, her voice sharp now. I've reviewed these documents extensively. What you orchestrated wasn't family concern. It was systematic psychological abuse designed to make your daughter believe she was incapable of sustaining relationships. I was protecting her. My mother shrieked, her careful composure shattering completely. She was always too weak, too emotional. She would have been destroyed without guidance. Whose guidance? I said, standing up now, my legs barely supporting me. Yours. The woman who hid my award invitation. Who told therapists I was unfit. Who arranged for my husband to leave me for my own sister. The words hung in the air like smoke. My sister, my husband, the two people who should have been on my side. Lydia's face crumpled. For the first time in my life, I saw her mask slip completely. It wasn't supposed to happen this way, she said quietly. We tried to wait. We tried to give you time to move on. Move on, I repeated, my voice breaking. You didn't wait for me to move on. You created the situation that destroyed my marriage in the first place. Oliver pulled out another document. Mom, there's more. The promotion you didn't get 8 years ago? Dad wasn't the only one who sabotaged it. He slid a printed email across the table. It was from Lydia to my former supervisor, dated 2 weeks before the promotion decision. I must express concern about my sister Megan's emotional stability. While talented, she struggles with stress management and interpersonal relationships. I worry that additional responsibility might trigger a breakdown. My vision tunneled. You wrote this. Lydia's silence was answer enough. Uncle Rick stood up, his face red. Eleanor? Lydia? What the hell have you been doing? My mother whirled on him. Stay out of this, Richard. You don't understand the complexities. Complexities, Aunt Joan said, her voice shaking. You manipulated your own daughter for decades. You destroyed her marriage. You conspired with her husband against her. We were trying to save her from herself. My mother shouted. She was never strong enough. Never capable. Someone had to make the hard decisions. Like deciding who she should be married to, Oliver said coldly. Like deciding whether she deserved success? Like deciding she was broken so you could control every aspect of her life? My mother's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Daniel finally found his voice. Megan, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Your mother, she convinced me that you'd be happier without the pressure of our marriage. That Lydia and I were better suited and you believed her. I said, tears streaming down my face now. You believed my mother over me? Your wife. You never fought for anything, Daniel said, and there was genuine frustration in his voice now. You just accepted everything. Every criticism, every setback. How was I supposed to respect that? Oliver's hand shot out and grabbed Daniel's collar before anyone could react. Don't you dare, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Don't you dare blame her for what you did. Dr. Hale stepped forward quickly. Oliver, let him go. My son released Daniel with a shove that sent him stumbling backward. You want to know why Mom never fought? Oliver said, addressing the entire room now. Because they trained her not to. From the time she was 7 years old, they told her she was broken. They hid opportunities from her. They sabotaged her relationships. They made her believe that everything wrong in her life was her fault. He turned to look at me, and his eyes were filled with tears. But it wasn't, Mom. None of it was. You were never broken. They broke you. The folder slipped from my hands and papers scattered across the floor. Decades of manipulation, lies, and betrayal spread out like evidence at a crime scene. Sarah, my cousin, spoke up for the first time, her voice small. Aunt Eleanor, is this all true? My mother straightened her spine, trying to reclaim some dignity. I did what any mother would do. I protected my daughter from making mistakes that would ruin her life, by ruining it yourself, Sarah said. Lydia sat back down heavily, her face in her hands. I loved him, Megan. I still love him. I'm sorry you got hurt, but I can't apologize for my feelings. Your feelings, I said, my voice rising. You're my sister. You were supposed to protect me, not conspire with my mother to destroy me. I was protecting you, Lydia said, looking up now, mascara running down her cheeks. From a marriage that was never going to work. From a life you weren't equipped to handle. And who decided I wasn't equipped? I screamed. Who made that choice? You, mother. Some therapist you paid to write reports. Oliver walked over and picked up the scattered papers. He organized them carefully, deliberately, and placed them back in the folder. Then he handed the folder to Dr. Hale. These need to be documented officially, he said. For the restraining order, my mother went white. Restraining order? Oliver? No, I said instinctively. That old programming kicking in? Protect the family. Don't make waves. Keep the peace. Mom, Oliver said, turning to me with such fierce love in his eyes that it broke something open in my chest. They don't get to do this anymore. Not to you. Not ever again. Dr. Hale nodded. Megan, you have legal grounds for multiple actions here. Fraud, emotional abuse, conspiracy to harm your professional reputation. Oliver and I have already consulted with an attorney. Daniel moved toward the door. I'm leaving. This is insane. Sit down, Oliver said, and something in his voice made Daniel freeze. Because there's one more thing nobody knows yet. Not even Mom. My blood turned to ice. What else could there possibly be? Oliver reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. He walked over to me and placed it in my hands. Open it, Mom, he said softly. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a birth certificate, but not mine. Not Oliver's. It was dated 1995. 3 years after I married Daniel. The mother's name? Eleanor Carter. The father's name was blank, and the child's name made my heart stop completely. I stared at the birth certificate, the paper trembling in my hands, and the words swam before my eyes until they finally came into focus. The child's name was Emma Louise Carter. Born March 15, 1995. Mother, Eleanor Carter. Father, unknown. But I knew, somehow in the deepest part of my soul, I knew exactly whose child this was. No, I whispered, looking up at Oliver. No, this can't be. My mother stood frozen, her face completely drained of color. For the first time in my entire life, Eleanor Carter looked terrified. Daniel had gone completely still, his hand gripping the back of a chair so tightly his knuckles were white. Lydia's face was a mask of confusion and dawning horror. Oliver, my mother said, her voice barely audible. Where did you get that? Does it matter? Oliver replied, his voice cutting. It exists. It's real, and it's registered with the state of Wisconsin. I couldn't breathe. My mind was racing, calculating dates. March 1995, that would have been conceived in June 1994. 2 years after May married Daniel. 1 year after our wedding, when we were supposed to be happy, building our life together. Someone needs to explain this right now, Uncle Rick said, standing up. Eleanor, what the hell is this? My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was Daniel who finally spoke, his voice hoarse. It was a mistake. The room erupted again, but all I could hear was the rushing in my ears, like standing under a waterfall. A mistake? I repeated. You had a child with my mother, and it was a mistake. It wasn't supposed to happen, Daniel said, and he actually looked anguished. Now, it was one time, Megan, one night when things between you and me were difficult, and your mother, she was understanding, and we'd both been drinking. Stop, I said, my voice breaking. Just stop. Lydia had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Mom, you didn't tell me, you didn't? But Eleanor Carter's silence was deafening. Oliver moved closer to me, his presence grounding me when everything else was spinning out of control. The child was given up for adoption, he said quietly. Closed adoption? No records of where she went. But it happened, Mom, and they all knew. I looked around the room, at Aunt Joan's horrified face, at Uncle Rick's disgusted expression, at my cousins who were staring at my mother and sister like they were strangers. You all knew, I whispered. Someone had to know. Someone had to have helped her hide this. Aunt Joan shook her head violently. I swear to God, Megan, I didn't know. None of us knew. But Dr. Hale pulled out another document from her briefcase. Actually, she said, her voice gentle but firm, Lydia knew. There are therapy session notes from 1996, where she discusses managing the family secret and protecting mother's reputation. Lydia's face crumpled. I was 24 years old. Mom told me she'd been assaulted, that she needed help. I didn't know it was Daniel until years later. And when you found out, Oliver asked coldly, when you discovered that the man you were falling in love with had fathered your mother's child, what did you do? Lydia's silence was answer enough. She stayed. She pursued him anyway. She helped cover it up. I felt something inside me break, but not in the way it had broken all my life. This wasn't the breaking of spirit or confidence. This was the breaking of chains. Get out, I said quietly. Everyone stared at me. Megan, my mother started. I said, get out, I repeated, louder now. All of you, Daniel, Lydia, Mother, get out of my sight before I have you arrested for fraud, for conspiracy, for whatever else Dr. Hale can think of. My mother tried one last time. Megan, you're being hysterical. We can discuss this calmly. Hysterical, I said. And I started laughing, a sound that bordered on hysteria, but was really just pure, liberating rage. That's what you've called me my entire life, isn't it? Hysterical, emotional, unstable, unfit, but I'm not any of those things. You're a monster. Eleanor Carter flinched like I'd struck her. I'm your mother. No, I said, my voice steady now, strong. You're the woman who gave birth to me, but you were never my mother. Mothers protect their children. They don't destroy them. Oliver handed me another folder, this one thinner. Mom, these are the papers Dr. Hale and I prepared. Restraining orders against Eleanor Carter, Lydia Brennan, and Daniel Whitmore. They can't contact you, can't come within 500 feet of you, Can't make any claims about your mental health or capacity without facing legal action." I took the folder with shaking hands. "How long?" "As long as you want," Dr. Hale said, "and if they violate it, they face criminal charges." Daniel moved toward me, his face desperate. "Megan, please, we can work through this." "For Oliver's sake?" Oliver stepped between us. "Don't use me as an excuse. I'm the one who exposed you. I'm the one who's going to make sure you never hurt her again." My son's voice cracked on that last word, and I saw tears streaming down his face. This strong, brave 19-year-old who had torn apart his entire family to save me. I pulled him into my arms. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." We stood there in that cafe, surrounded by scattered documents and shattered relationships. And for the first time in 49 years, I felt real. I felt seen. I felt like I mattered. My mother tried one more time. "You'll regret this, Megan, when you're alone. When you've pushed everyone away, you'll realize we were trying to help you." "No," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "I'll regret wasting 49 years believing you, but I won't regret this." Aunt Jones stood up, walked over to me, and took my hands. "Megan, I'm so sorry. If I'd known, if any of us had known." "I know," I said, squeezing her hands. "Thank you." One by one, my cousins came over. Sarah, Nina, Mark. They hugged me, apologized, promised to stay in touch. Uncle Rick clapped Oliver on the shoulder. "You're a good kid. Your mom's lucky to have you." Oliver nodded, his jaw still tight. "She deserves better than this family gave her." That night, Oliver and I packed up my apartment in Maple Hollow. We loaded everything into a rental truck and drove through the night to Chicago, leaving behind 49 years of manipulation, lies, and pain. For the first few months, I waited for the guilt to set in, for the voice in my head that sounded like my mother, telling me I'd made a mistake, that I was being dramatic, that I should forgive and forget. But it never came. Instead, I felt lighter, freer, like I'd been carrying a weight my entire life, and finally set it down. Oliver helped me find a therapist, a real one this time. Someone Dr. Hale recommended who specialized in family trauma and psychological abuse. In our sessions, I learned words for what had been done to me. Gaslighting, narcissistic abuse, scapegoating, triangulation. I learned that my mother had made me the family scapegoat, the one who absorbed all the blame so that Lydia could remain perfect. I learned that nothing I could have done would have been enough, because I was never supposed to succeed. I was supposed to fail so they could feel superior. I got a job at a publishing house, using the writing skills I'd buried for decades. My editor told me I had a gift for storytelling, for seeing the truth in complicated narratives. She didn't know how much practice I'd had. Oliver started college in Chicago, studying psychology. He wanted to help other people who'd been manipulated by their families, who'd been told they were broken when they were really just trapped. We had dinner together 3 times a week. We talked about everything about his childhood, about the signs he'd seen but hadn't understood until he was older, how Daniel had never really looked at me, how my mother always found ways to undermine my confidence, how Lydia had played the concerned sister while poisoning every relationship I tried to build. "I wish I'd figured it out sooner," Oliver said one night, over pizza. "I wish I could have protected you earlier. You were a child," I told him. "It wasn't your job to protect me. But thank you for seeing the truth when you did. Thank you for being brave enough to expose it." We didn't hear from my mother or Lydia or Daniel for 10 months. The restraining orders held. They didn't try to contact us. I started to believe that maybe, finally, I was free. And then this morning, 11 months after that Christmas party, I found an envelope slipped under my apartment door. No postage. No return address. Hand-delivered. Inside was a single piece of cream-colored stationery, the expensive kind my mother always used for important correspondence. The handwriting was unmistakable. Eleanor Carter's perfect cursive, each letter precisely formed. "You weren't meant to keep him, Megan, but you fought. We're not done with you yet." My hands shook as I read it again and again. Meant to keep him. Keep who? Oliver? Daniel? Or was she talking about someone else entirely? Some other secret I hadn't uncovered yet? I called Dr. Hale immediately. She told me to document everything, to report it to the police as a violation of the restraining order, to install security cameras. I did all of that. But I also called Oliver, who came over within 20 minutes. He read the note, his face going pale. "She's threatening you," he said. "We need to increase security. Maybe you should move again somewhere she can't find you." "No," I said, surprised by the strength in my own voice. "I'm not running anymore. I'm not hiding. If she wants to come after me, let her. But I'm not giving her the power to scare me into disappearing." Oliver looked at me with something like pride. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," I said. And I was, because something had shifted in me that night at the cafe. Something fundamental. I wasn't the scared little girl dropping ornaments anymore. I wasn't the teenager finding hidden invitations and wondering why I wasn't enough. I wasn't the woman accepting blame for a marriage sabotaged before it began. I was someone who'd survived 49 years of systematic destruction and come out the other side. I was someone who'd raised a son brave enough to burn down lies. I was someone who deserved better, who demanded better, who would never again accept anything less. So now I sit here, 2 weeks before Christmas, with my mother's threat on my kitchen table and security cameras watching my door. Oliver is researching private investigators. Who can trace how she found my address? Dr. Hale is filing additional legal motions. My cousins Sarah and Nina have offered to fly in if I need support. For the first time in my life, I have people on my side. Real people, not manipulators hiding behind family loyalty. But there's something my mother doesn't know, something I discovered in my own digging over these past 11 months. That baby girl, Emma Louise Carter, the one given up for adoption in 1995, she's not lost to history. Closed adoptions can be opened under certain circumstances, especially when there's evidence of fraud or coercion. And I've been working with an adoption specialist, following leads, making phone calls. Because if my mother thinks she can threaten me, she clearly doesn't know what I'm capable of now. She doesn't know that the daughter she spent a lifetime breaking has learned how to fight back. Emma would be 29 years old now, old enough to know the truth, old enough to decide whether she wants to meet the family who created her and then erased her, old enough to testify if it comes to that. My hands are shaking as I seal my own envelope. This one addressed to a lawyer in Madison, Wisconsin. Inside are documents requesting the unsealing of Emma Louise Carter's adoption records, and a letter explaining everything. The lies, the manipulation, the baby born from betrayal and given away to preserve appearances. I drop the envelope in the mail slot and walk back to my apartment, where Oliver is making dinner and Christmas lights are twinkling in the window. My mother wrote that they're not done with me yet, but what she doesn't understand is that I'm not done with them either. And this time, I'm not fighting alone. If this story shook you to your core, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you never miss what happens when Emma surfaces and my mother's final secret gets exposed. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my place. And like this video if you believe some family ties deserve to be cut forever.